here is roughly how the Catechism would go. I would say to you, I am the priest of conscience presiding on this exchange, and I would say to you, now you stand before the question of suffering. In the first place, do you accept to face it or not? If you want to face it, you say yes. If you don't want to face the question of suffering, you can use the opt-out clause in the Bhagavad Gita. If any man thinks he slays, or if another thinks he is slain, neither knows the ways of truth. The internal in man cannot kill, the eternal in man cannot die. Do you believe that? If you believe that, then there is your escape clause. You can say, I plead Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, verse 19, and you split. However, if you choose to stand in naked honesty and sobriety before the question of suffering, then the Catechism continues, and I ask you, do you renounce all excuses for suffering that could be used to refer to some transcendental or superhuman agency who brings suffering into the world for its own mysterious purposes? The answer is, yes, I exclude that. Do you agree not to cite theodicy, and that is to apologize for God in some way to get around the question of suffering? Yes, you agree. Do you agree that there is no karma and no karmic consequences? Yes, you agree. Do you agree that there are no moral consequences of any action? There is only a moral premise to the action. Yes, you agree. Do you agree that guilt is not enough in facing the direct or deliberate perpetration of suffering? That is to say, assigning blame or assigning guilt is not enough. You agree. Finally, do you agree to forego the question of forgiveness as a way to make yourself comfortable with the burden of suffering in the world? Yes, I agree to forego forgiveness. And finally, do you agree in facing the question of suffering to forego and dismiss the idea of karmic compensation? According to this idea, some inexplicable law of karma operating in the cosmos ensures that good deeds will be rewarded and bad deeds will be punished. Do you agree to entirely forego and dismiss this notion of karmic compensation? The answer is yes, I agree to forego and dismiss karmic compensation. Having made those matters clear, we come to the second step. Second step involves the question, do you agree to hold to the clear and vivid distinction between two kinds of suffering, that which is deliberately caused by human animals, harming others, and that which happens in ways not due to human agency? Yes, I agree to hold to that distinction as an existential fact. That is how you would answer in this little catechism I'm proposing. And get me on this, get me straight and clear. Every single person would have to go through this catechism point by point, aloud, with another human individual as a kind of exercise. And the answers would be the same for all of us. Why? Because the challenge given to us by the Aeons of Fire to construct social order upon the foundation of individual conscience requires this construction. And it requires it to be done openly, verbally, honestly, nakedly, and in the humility of seeing that it is absolutely the same for everyone. So let's proceed a little bit further. You agree that we can ascertain that some harm doing is due to human agencies, even though we may not be able to identify specifically who those agencies are. Do you agree? Yes, you agree. So you agree to see and admit deliberate harm when it happens. Yes, I agree to see and admit deliberate harm when it happens. And let me remind you all that in the initial stage of the Catechism, you agreed to forego any theodicy. Theodicy means making apologies for God. An apologist. There are no apologies allowed in the construction of conscience. Do you get that? Okay, here is the third stage of constructing conscience. Given your consent, demonstrated by the preceding steps of the Catechism, you now stand before the question of suffering as a responsible human being. Do you accept that you are responsible for all the suffering committed by human animals on other human animals? even if you yourself are not the agent, the one who commits it? Can you accept such a responsibility? If you can, then you are ready to go from the theoretical or preparatory stage of constructing conscience to the application of that conscience. Therefore, how do you apply a conscience? Well, once you know that you have one, you apply it in a particular manner. How do you know that you have a conscience? You know that when you can say to another human being, face to face and eye to eye, I accept responsibility to handle the harm and evil done by human animals, even if I myself am not the animal who committed that harm and that evil. If there is a factor of compassion in the construction of conscience, then this is where you find it. It doesn't mean that you bond with the victims, but it means that you take responsibility for the perpetrators as if you were one yourself, as if you were one of them yourself. But they obviously do not take responsibility for themselves. Therefore, the Catechism now proposes the challenge of conscience, which is, are you willing to take responsibility for doing something about those who deliberately cause harm and death to others? Yes or no? And if you say yes, then comes the next question. Are you willing to go to the extent of using force and the violent exertion of force in order to handle those who commit deliberate evil? Yes or no? Now, there's a division that arises in the Catechism at this point. If you answer no to that last question, then the Catechism comes up with another question for you. Are you willing to support those people who are willing to use violence and the exertion of violent force against those who deliberately harm others? If you are not, then you are required at this point in the Catechism to excuse yourself, because you are in effect admitting that you would like to have a conscience, but not only do you not want to act on it, but you don't want to support anyone else who might act on theirs. So even though you may have gotten this far in the Catechism, you are deselected on the basis of your response. Now, the final steps of this exercise. Then if you agree to take responsibility for facing the evil deliberately committed by certain human beings, and for facing those human animals yourself in whatever situation it may be possible to do so, if you say yes to all that, then the final question is, are you ready, willing, and able to place yourself in the ranks of a warrior class?